So I'd say being patient's number one. I say about the brand, sometimes you want to ride a wave, but sometimes you want to start a wave.
Hey guys, it's Joey Chanel from Sippin Selling, and today's guest is my friend Chris Arce from Flanagan's restaurant chain here in South Florida and Big Daddy's Liquors. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Awesome to be here, Joey. It really is a pleasure to be invited onto this podcast. I know you got high expectations here. I know this is going to be a great podcast. I'm excited just to be here because I could see this transitioning into something bigger. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're so welcome. Thank you for coming. I really want everybody to hear about your backgrounds. The reason I invited you here is because I found that we have similar backgrounds, that we work with family. And being that the premise of Sippin Selling is that I'm a female in this industry and not a lot of us are out there, I thought that it would be a cool dynamic and a cool conversation to have, being that you work with your family and you're a male. And I wanted to see if there's differences that I would expect or not expect. I also feel like you're going to have a lot of fun stories to tell me and the audience. So I'm happy that you're going to share with us.
Yeah, no, thank you again. And it's interesting, right? You were saying you have your father, I have my grandfather in the industry, and there's not many family aspects within this industry. There might be a few, but especially in South Florida, industry's only been since the 1900s, you know, and you might say, well, that's a long time ago, but you have New York that might have been from the 1800s, you know, so there's not that much of a family atmosphere here, but we do have some family businesses, which is great. A little background about me. So I've been a part of the Flanagan's family and the Big Daddy's family ever since I was 10,
Wow.
I think. And you might have similar stories, but growing up, I was maybe 10 years old, 12 years old, and my grandfather would pick me up on a Sunday morning and say, hey, we're going to go do inventory. And I'm like, not something I want to do on a Sunday, you know? And shortly after that, I'm like, okay, am I getting paid for this? And he's like, no, but I could pay you in Flanagan's ribs. I'm like, okay, well, at 12 years old, I could take that. That's a great payment. So
I agree.
It's been great, you know.
That's amazing. So yes, I think most of us who are in Florida know the Flanagan's chain. It's a landmark here in South Florida. But for those of you listening out there who maybe haven't visited Florida, can we talk a little bit about the restaurant chain, what they're known for, how many locations, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So company was founded in 1959, and a lot of people don't realize this. The company started as a liquor store chain. It wasn't a restaurant. Started as a liquor store chain, and we gradually went into the lounge concept in the late 60s, early 70s, and that was when Flanagan's kind of took off as a company. Started as State Liquors, was our original name, transitioned to Big Daddy's Liquors and Big Daddy's Lounges, and that was a time frame of, I would like to say, chaos in South Florida in the 70s and 80s, a little crazy part, and after that time frame, you know, in the late 90s or early 90s, I should say, we started transitioning to the restaurant industry. We still have 14 liquor stores today. We had 12 about 2 years ago, and we've slowly been expanding. So we expanded to 14. The restaurants have always been expanding, you know, ever since. So what they did was all the lounges we had, we started transitioning to restaurants, you know, and the way it started was some of our founding partners, you know, whether it's Jimmy Flanagan, his father Joe, who started the company, even the great Kevin King, like I like to call him, they went fishing. Their whole persona was fishing.
Okay.
So they would catch all these fish, bring it back to these lounges, and you know what? People were like, well, this fish is pretty good that you guys are cooking, and that's where they got the idea to transition into restaurants. So that part is interesting, and then, you know, now they got 25 restaurants.
That's impressive.
And slowly growing.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I mean, it's like I said, it's a landmark here in South Florida. If you're ever in the area, please go check out Flanagan's. And if you need to shop for any goods, to go to the beach and go fishing potentially, go to Big Daddy's Liquors. So that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about. You went and did inventory. For those of you that don't know what that means, you were probably out there counting bottles of products that were, you know, the biggest sellers back then and maybe not so big. What else did you end up doing to now, you know, you were 10 then. Now you're a little bit older.
Yeah.
And you are in charge of Big Daddy's in what capacity?
So I'm the purchaser right now. I'm also the supervisor of operations. So we got a great team right now. My direct boss is the vice president of the company, and his boss is Jimmy Flanagan. And the team of us that operate Big Daddies is we all want to do a little bit of everything. We're all involved in a little bit of everything because when you only got 4 people to run this division, it's difficult. We're also one of the only publicly traded liquor stores in the world. I haven't found another one, so definitely if there's another one out there, please give me a call. But the purchasing is what I love to do. I get to meet people like you, Joey. I get to meet people around the world. And to me, growing up, that's what I saw. Yes, I did inventory when I was 12, and we could joke about that. But seeing my grandfather work in the industry and basically run the package division, which is what we call it, he was always getting phone calls, and I'm like, why are you getting phone calls? We're out at dinner, and it's like a guy from Russia is giving him a call. A guy from Mexico is giving him a call. And I'm like, why are you getting all this? And he would always tell me, he's like, Chris, at the end of the day, it's not about how much money you make. Yes, that's important, but it's sometimes about the people you know. And I think that's led me to where I'm at today, to meet people like you and to do things like this. So it's been great.
That's very sweet of you. And I agree, the feeling's mutual. I love being in this industry because as big as it is small. I've talked about this before. And, it is all about relationships. And at the end of the day, that's why we're here today. And the purpose of Sippin Selling. I wanted to ask you some questions that I felt were a little bit unique to me and my background. I feel like there's a lot of pressure when you work in a family industry. And I don't know if it's just because I'm female and I'm working for my dad or with my brothers, or if it is just a general feeling. It's not just like making a boss proud when you have family heritage there and all this history. I'm curious how you feel about it. Do you feel like you just naturally stepped into this role and everything's been, seamless with a few hiccups? Or do you feel like you have a lot of pressure and a lot of weight on your shoulders?
A lot of pressure, a lot of weight. I think you might feel the same way because I know you care, and when you get to meet people, you see if they care or not. And I kind of get that instantly. Does somebody care to sit down with you and reach out to you and want to make things work? Or are they just like, yeah, here's a bottle of vodka. Do you want to buy it? And I could get that off the bat. So it's a lot of pressure. I wasn't given this role. I wasn't starting, hey, you're going to just buy liquor and figure it out. Or, hey, you got your grandfather and he's going to sit next to you. It's like, no, I started working in the stores. So I started 18 years old working as a cashier in our Hialeah store. And working night windows, being the janitor to pick up if somebody unfortunately throws up, or picking up trash or stocking the shelves. I wasn't buying at the time. And I went through that for 4 or 5 years, bounced around different stores, went to our warehouse and worked in our warehouse for a few years. And I got to be firsthand with the guys on the ground. They're the ones who make the difference. I could come up with a great deal or do a great buy or bring in a new product, but the guys in the field and the women we have now, managers working for us, they make the difference. So when I was down there to work with them, it was interesting. It was at 18 years old working every weekend, like, yes, I didn't have a life outside. It was just, work, hey, you're going to start here and see how it goes. So a lot of pressure. In that time frame, it was interesting because you don't know what you're going to do. Am I going to be able to get this role? And my grandfather had retired by that time. So the Flanagan family really took me under their wing and said, hey, let's see where this takes you. I started working there and they said, okay, we're going to move you up to the manager position. So I became a manager. After that, I became the head of shipping. After that, I was brought into the office and was like, okay, you're going to do invoicing and do accounts payable. And I'm like, that's not really what I want to do, but hey, let's see how this goes. And now to be a purchaser and supervisor of operations, it's a long journey, journey.
You definitely paid your dues, that's for sure. Cleaning up vomit is not on my to-do list.
Not fun. Not fun.
I can't say that I did it, so you one-up me on that one for sure. So that's really interesting about that. We both feel that way about pressure with our families. I think that's a pretty obvious answer, but I was just curious if it was different. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, now that you're in purchasing, like you said, it's about the relationships, and I'm sure you see a lot of different brands every day. What particularly outside of feeling comfortable with the supplier that comes to you, do you look for in brands what makes you say yes, what what also makes you say no. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's fine. I can switch the conversation because I do have a follow-up. But for me on the supplier side, I find that when I go into a meeting like at Big Daddy's and I have a couple samples in my book to show you, I know that I'm probably lucky if I get one. And me personally, you know how I am. I'm always going to shove everything at you and just see if you like anything. Because for me personally, I feel like the brands in my book, I bring them all on because I know I can do something with them. But just because we're friends, it doesn't mean that you're going to bring in every item that I show you. And you're not going to think that every item I show you is great. Or maybe it doesn't fit your shelf. So tell me some of the things that you do look for outside of people caring and being good to you. What else do you look for when you're, in these supplier meetings that make you say yes or no?
Well, I might give out the secret sauce now, and everyone's gonna be calling my phone. But I think, Joey, like you said, relationships are big. I mean, that's huge to me. You could obviously develop new ones, right? That doesn't happen overnight. I think what I look for is I got to look at my shelf sets. I got to look at what we have, what's hot in the industry, what's maybe hot outside of South Florida, not hot here that I get presented a lot. There is so many brands, and the hardest thing I have to say is no. As a buyer and a purchaser, I don't know if you do many or meet any other buyers or purchasers who want to sit down with you like me, but the hardest thing for me to say is no. And why that's difficult is if I got a great relationship with you and I have a great relationship with many other partners of mine, and if I had wall stretchers, I would put them in and bring in all these products and try to sell them because the relationship goes a long way, and I want to give people that opportunity.
Right.
There's a lot of local brands out there coming out, and I'm like, okay, we need to give them a shot too. We're local, we need to help them out. There's so many aspects. I mean, it would take an hour just to go through it.
We could do a whole series, but I agree with you. I personally appreciate that you said partner because a lot of people don't consider suppliers to be partners, but I mean, you're investing in their brands. You're putting real estate on your shelf space, like you said, and you potentially could be doing them a favor because you're their first chain and you could be moving another brand that's giving you steady income, right? And then you're going to remove that real estate for a friend or a local brand, and it may not work out. So I personally have seen and heard, and I'm sure you have too, like all the success stories. And I think the biggest one that we all reference is Mr. Tito's sleeping in his car and showing up to trade shows. And then, Tito's is what Tito's is. What are some of the stories that you remember hearing in the industry? And you don't have to name the brands, but that you really thought, they were going to do so great. And maybe there's tips that you could offer to suppliers that you feel like, they just missed the mark with.
I will get into that. I think some of these brands that come out, I've been pitched a lot of brands, a lot over the years. I've had a seltzer brand that I thought would never go anywhere. Never, ever. We gave it a shot. We even ran a promo and it didn't do well. And I remember my distributor partner was like, hey, just give it a shot. Let it sit there. It ends up being the number one seltzer today in the world, which if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's High Noon. Okay. High Noon has just turned the corner. And I think another one is, people would be shocked by this, Blanton's. Blanton's bourbon used to sit on our shelves for a long time. It would be on the top shelf. Nobody would look at it. Nobody would care. And then boom, it hits the bourbon wave and people start buying Blanton's and now it's allocated and that whole story. So some tips I would give is, as a buyer, be patient with your buyer. Your buyer usually is not just buying and selling and obviously being a retailer, it's not just buying product. He or she has a lot going on. So I'd say being patient is number one. I say about the brand, sometimes you want to ride a wave, but sometimes you want to start a wave. I think one of the most popular things right now that's being presented is THC drinks. That's something we never thought we'd get into, never thought we'd look at. And I've been pitched a few recently, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is something that's going to start a new wave in the industry. So that's interesting. But it comes and goes. I know gin is another one. A lot of people like gin, but South Florida is not a gin market.
No, it's not.
It's not.
No,
so
it's not.
There's a lot of branding. I think branding's good. I think making your bottles look different on the shelf is huge. And you got to look at your category. I think something like tequila and seltzers, people are willing to try new ones. The customers are coming in. They're willing to try anything new. The problem is, what are they going to stick with in the long run? And we're still having to wait to figure that out. Something like Scotch and bourbon, you just got to make a quality product. Scotch and bourbon consumers are just looking for that next big thing. They're looking for the quality and what it is. And opposite of your tequila customer, they're looking at, what am I going to take to a party? What are people going to look at and say, this is a beautiful bottle? I think tequila industry is moving to that additive free, and people are starting to research more, but that didn't happen overnight. That just happened within the last couple of years. So depends on the category. That's another one. But having good bottle placements, having good on-premise opportunities to start, how the bottles look, having a quality brand, and then just being patient, knowing that you're not going to build that brand overnight. And like you said with Tito's, the guy sleeping in his car, Tito's was laughed out of some meetings.
Yep.
From the stories I've heard back in the day, and look what it is today. So never give up. That's what I'll say.
Definitely never give up. I remember walking on South Beach with my luggage that I used to carry all my bottles in, and I'd see him all the time. We'd be the only ones sometimes walking around South Beach, and he'd have his dog with him, and it was kind of a little gimmicky, I thought. I'm like, wow, this is very interesting. It's a totally different angle, but that's who he was. He was very kind. He loved his dog, and he loved his product. And it was something, innovative, and everybody's trying to be him now and chase him. And he's always been this authentic person. And it's really great when you have a story like that. And like you're saying with High Noon, I mean, there's been different types of RTDs all throughout prior to our lives, right? Like where we were illegal to drink. There's Zimas of the world and that sort of thing. And, I feel like a lot of you buyers have can fatigue. I understand that's why this THC CBD movement's coming. My dad's rum has the hemp infusion, and we know that that's the next wave and the next craze. But I mentioned it on my last show. I do get worried because some of these brands I've seen that come to me to ask for help, they don't have age statements. So obviously I know you're looking at that, but some of these C stores, which are like the gas stations, they're maybe not. And then that's the thing that worries me with that category, being a mom. I get a little nervous about that. So anybody listening out there who is coming out with a THC CBD product and maybe doesn't have an age statement, put it on there. But yes, that's definitely the next big thing. Is there anything else that you've been presented recently? And again, you don't have to say the names, that you were either blown away by the nuance of it, or you were just like, this is so gross. Like, sometimes there's a pickled flavored something, and I'm just so against that. It's like, let's keep the pickleback shot the way it's supposed to be with just the juice. Let's not create something, but that's me.
Yeah, I think everyone in the industry knows of the old days of Pinnacle root beer and Pinnacle gummy bears and all those flavors they came out with. And there might have been a time and a place for it, but it's crazy. We've been presented bacon flavored stuff, pancake flavored items. I think pickle had a little movement there with the pickleback shot. But man, I do get presented some weird things. I think the weirdest one recently was Eggo waffled flavored
I
drinks,
saw that. Ugh.
Which you could also look at it as a retailer perspective and be like, hey, there's somebody out there who's going to buy the
nostalgia?
how would you say that? The nostalgia
Yeah.
of that. Yeah, that's a good word to say. So that might sell. But looking at it from a grand scheme, I'm like, I don't know if that's a flavor that will last.
No, that's definitely like a flash in the pan, or like those Sunny Delight cans. That was another one. But again, going back to me being a mom, and again, this is from a female's perspective, so I could be not hitting anybody out there in the audience. I just feel like that's targeting kids, so I don't love it. Okay, bacon's gross.
Yes.
Who wants to do that? Even if you're putting it in a Bloody Mary, it makes zero sense. I had said there was a Dorito flavored vodka that came out across my desk, and that was just wild. Like, who wants that? Seriously, like, I don't want to taste cheese on my breath after I have a shot of something or a martini. That's very bizarre.
I think we're all surprised at those things, but then you have that one that comes out, and I think you might know what I'm going to get into, is peanut butter flavor.
Oh, yes.
Where everybody looked at it and said, that might be gross. Who's going to want peanut butter to drink? And now it becomes one of the top shooter brands ever. So as a buyer, you have to give some of those a shot. It's almost like throw it on the wall, see what sticks concept, but you want to give it a point. Like you said, Dorito flavor. I don't know if we're Taco Bell here to add that in, but peanut butter was when I was like, really? And it's great when you do have distributors and good partners that can show you data, rather than just say, hey, look, we have a year snapshot, and it's like, yeah, okay, but the reason why you're the fastest growing brand is because everyone brought it in for the first time. I
Right.
want to see the reorders on this. I want to see what on-premise activity you're in. A lot of people say it starts in on. I think that's true. There is some brands that start in the off as well, but to see, okay, you're being poured in all these high-end restaurants in South Florida, let's give that a look. You know, I
Right.
think that's more telling than I'm up 150% compared to nothing. You know, that's always a funny concept I see.
That is. And you have, a unique perspective because you have Flanagan's data
Yes.
and Big Daddy's. I do focus on building brands in the off trade. And so majority of brands that come across my desk that I bring on, if I don't think they're going to have a retail presence or they don't have the budget to do samplings in stores like Big Daddy's to move the needle, I don't necessarily want to bring them on. I don't like working in the on-premise anymore because I find that it's too difficult being a mom, being a business owner. I don't need to be out late at night in clubs or restaurants to pitch my brand and keep it moving. So I like that you have this unique perspective. Is it fair to say that if a brand is doing well in Flanagan's, it's going to be carried in Big Daddy's?
I would say yes and no to that. There's a lot of brands within Big Daddy's that sell very well, very well. The restaurant industry is very different than the off. We could have 5,000 SKUs in my store, and maybe 1,000 of them are really good sellers. Restaurant can't have 1,000 brands, you know. So I do think there's a little bit of yes and no with that. The on-premise side, we partner with the Flanagans. Obviously, we're the same company, just different divisions. We're able to give them insights in the off, which is great for them to know. And they kind of have taken the avenue of, hey, if you're in Big Daddy's and you're successful and you're running promos and you're selling, then we'll give you a look. And we've brought in some brands, you know, some local ones, you know, like 11 Vodka, like Voli Vodka. Those are some 2 local brands that have done remarkable with Big Daddy's. We like to partner with local people, but then they get into the on, and it takes another level
Yes.
with the Flanagan's aspect. So they look at us to provide them information, and we might push them in the right direction. Like, hey, this peanut butter whiskey, I know you might be not skeptical about
Yeah.
it, but maybe you should just put it in some stores and see how it goes. So that's an avenue that we take.
Very nice. I love that you brought up Voli Vodka. I have a special spot for that brand in my heart. I love Pitbull. I grew up half my life in Puerto Rico, and I saw him perform multiple times when I was a kid. And then I was working at the Aspen Food and Wine Festival, and he had just launched Voli, and he did a contest for mixologists to find like his top cocktails. And then he did a private concert where he flew them out to the Aspen Food and Wine Festival, and then they got to see him perform. So, I got an invite to that. I made sure I was front row. And after the show, I got to meet him, and he was so kind and so down to earth and humble. And, we exchanged phone numbers, which I was like, this is wild. And this is before I lived in Florida. And then years later, they brought the brands, to South Beach Food and Wine Festival. He showed up there, and I eventually had a friend that I got hired to work for the company. So I always loved watching that brand. I wanted it to flourish. I did cocktails with it in the on-premise when I was doing that back then with a brand that I sold that went well with it. And then later in life, shoot past me opening up my company, Cade Cap. I met with his partner, Priscilla, who's female and Latin, and she's the greatest. Shout out, Priscilla.
We love Priscilla.
Yeah, we
Yes.
love her. Hopefully she'll be on the pod soon. She said she would. And, they've just had this refresh, relaunch, basically, where people appreciate them. I feel like, I don't know what happened originally, just maybe mismanagement. And that happens, right? Like you said, it's about the people, and you have to have the right people around you. And sometimes, unfortunately, you don't end up with the right people around you. And I love that they had the second chance. Pitbull just relaunched the product all over that Hard Rock Hotel. And I mean, they just are blowing up. He's got residencies now. So it's like so fun because, even with us, you are excited to be here. You're proud of me. I'm proud of you for doing it. You know, that personal connection, you just feel like a cheerleader as a female, I guess. And then, you know, I just love cheering on my fellow colleagues, and also, you know, being that she's female, I feel like, you know, she just really took it to the next level, and I'm proud of them. And I think that's so rare, because we see so many brands that we think are going to be great, and then, like I said, they're flash in the pan, or they're here today, gone tomorrow. They're not having those Tito's success stories. I don't want to ask you to name brands, like I said before, that maybe you thought were going to do well and they didn't. But I do want you to tell me what other brands are doing really amazing right now that maybe people don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of brands out there. Like you said, Priscilla with Voli's one. You know, having that celebrity partnership with Pitbull. I mean, if you're in South Florida, you know the 305 Dollar.
Yes,
you know,
that's right.
That's all day. But being at the Hard Rock, you know, Jimmy Flanagan was there, and it was a great connection. It had a Flanagan, you know, Pitbull moment. So
nice.
That was cool, really cool. But what they've done is great, you know, with the brand, and to see it grow. Like you said, we partner a lot of local brands. And when you get to see them grow like that and take the next step and partner with us, I mean, it's a win-win for everybody. It really is. Some other brands I will say that, trying to think here.
I'm putting you on the spot, which you didn't want me to do. But I had another idea that I thought would have been way funnier to put you on the spot, but I'm going to be nice. I was going to ask you to do a blind taste test. I'm going to blindfold you. So this should be easy. You just come up with some brands you think that people should go try out and buy at Big Daddy's.
Absolutely. You know, people always say, Chris, do you taste liquor all day? And I'm like, no. You know, no. I have a job to do. Is there times where it's 9 a.m. and we have to taste something? Of course. But God, if you could, I'm not no sommelier or whiskey expert, but we do look at the data. That's what helps makes our decisions, and labels help, and seeing what the market does, asking about competitors. You know, we got great relationships with competitors out there, and to be able to share information sometimes is huge.
Okay.
Huge for us.
Nice. So what's the fastest selling tequila at Big Daddy's right now?
Oof, another one putting me on the spot.
Yeah, well, you don't want to give me brand names.
If I want to say right now, this month, we got a great partnership with El Tequileño.
Okay.
They're doing a great job with that company. We've seen it grow with us, and we're running a promo with them right now.
Nice.
So probably our number one seller right now would be them. Overall, the Reposado industry.
Yes.
Reposado is huge right now. Within my stores at least, has overtaken Blanco by far. Fastest growing one, definitely Don Julio Repo.
Yes.
For sure. A lot of companies try to match it. But I will say it's just that Reposado industry, whether you're Don Julio or anybody else, has taken the leap. You know, a lot of customers were buying during the COVID pandemic era. Your Clase Azules, your 1942s, your high-end products.
They were getting those checks.
Oh, yeah. They were getting those checks and spending them.
Yes,
and I can tell you they were spending them in the liquor industry, because we were having to buy pallets of that stuff at a time. And now it's taken the opposite swing, where people are trading down.
Okay.
You know, they're trading down and trying, you know what? 1942 was great. You know, your Clase Azules was great, but what am I going to try on the daily? You know, what am I going to have on a weekly? I can't do that every week to be able to spend that type of money. So we've seen the downward trend a little bit. Whether you were buying 1942 and now you're buying Don Julio Repo, or you're going into just a new category of Reposado, but that has taken by storm.
I agree, because there's a lot of brands that come to me that are made out of the same nom as Don Julio or 1942, and it's just a less, expensive version. And a lot of people are those tequila, aficionados, and they really understand what I'm talking about. But for those of you listening out there that don't, on the back of most tequila bottles, there's an NOM number, and that tells you where it's distilled. And you can find out if some of these brands that Chris is mentioning, or that I sell, like De Nada Tequila, are manufactured with the same juice, just less expensive. Okay, so we talked about the tequila. What do you like to drink, Chris? What's your favorite thing to drink when it is time to drink, not 9 a.m.?
Yeah, not 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I do try a lot of things, which helps. That's helped me a lot, just like you have. You've been able to meet different people and talk about different brands. If I'm gonna drink something, recently I've gotten into mezcal.
Oh,
I really have. I like that smokiness to it. I love how it's part of that tequila family, but not. And then whiskey,
okay.
if I would say as well. Something we talked about now, that reposado trend, right? It's caught, I think, the general public by storm, but now you have the consumers educating themselves on tequila, where you could have brands like female owned as well, La Gritona, Mi Genta, and those additive free brands are really taking the next step with us. I'm not saying they're on that level yet, but they're gaining that traction, and there are a lot more quality products out there that you could try in the tequila, category. If you're a consumer drinking tequila, try something new.
Yes.
I will say definitely try something new. I like mezcal. If you've never heard of mezcal, I'll say give it a try. It has a unique flavor profile. There's many brands, and a lot of them are made with a lot of quality. They really care about their product.
For sure. What's your favorite mezcal brands?
Oof, another one on the spot. Everyone's going to say, oh, I bet he's going to say Del Maguey. I think that's a big one. Some that I've tried recently, Lost Explorer.
Okay.
Little quality there, but very good. Rey Campero is another one that I've tried and very good. And then we actually just partnered with La Luna
Oh, nice.
Mezcal, and we have our barrel pick coming out soon. So if you're into mezcal and want to try something new, come by Big Daddy's, and we'll have a barrel pick of mezcal, which down here I haven't seen many of them. So
That's
we're excited
awesome.
for that.
I love that. A lot of people like to drink mezcal and then have a little orange bite after. Do you do that?
I don't.
Okay.
I've done it once.
Okay.
But I just, on the rocks is nice. Just something, if
Sip.
I'm just to sip on. A lot of people think tequila or mezcal, you're going to take a shot. I'm like, no, I'm not a shot person. I'm definitely not.
I mean, me either. I've never been a shot girl. It's not my thing. But going back to talking about other tequilas and in the female industry, I just brought on a brand. I don't know if they were pitched to you yet. Chicas Divertidas with Megan Thee Stallion.
So I've looked into that. I'm glad you mentioned it. We have
Okay.
had some customers reach out. I haven't been able to find out who carries it, so this is a surprise.
Southern Wine and Spirits.
Well, there you go. Because I looked actually a month ago when it first came out. I'm like, I can't find this.
Okay.
So I knew between my partners and people I work with closely, I'm like, this is going to come on my doorstep eventually. So that's good to hear.
Here we go. There was me dropping the bomb on Chris, and I didn't even
This is a
mean
sales
to.
pitch you
This
didn't
is
know.
my sales pitch. Oh my gosh. Well, no, I really did. I thought it'd be funny. I ran it by my producer that we should do a blind taste test, but I was like, no, he's not the guy. I don't want to mess with him. He's too nice. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here. It was such a fun time talking to you. I love hearing about your history with Flanagan's and Big Daddy's. I love hearing about what you like to drink. I appreciate all of your candid answers. I know that a lot of them were difficult questions, and I don't mean to ever make any of my friends feel uncomfortable, but I appreciate you being here, and I hope you'll come back. And I would love to send you off with a little toast. I know we're not supposed to toast with water, but we're going to toast with water because we're not drinking at 9 a.m. And we're going to say, have a great rest of your holiday weekends, everybody. And thanks for tuning in to Sippin' and Selling, and we'll see you next time.